How do we get from Henry VIII to Queen Victoria? We're going to need one of these. Henry VIII had tried really hard to have a son, but in the beginning he had a daughter, and she was called Mary. And then he had another daughter, and she was called Elizabeth. But then he had a son, and he was called Edward, and he became Edward VI. Now, he died as a teenager and didn't have an heir. So the throne went to his half-sister Mary, who became Mary I. Now, she died without an heir of her own, and the crown went to her half-sister, who became Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I died without an heir of her own, and so where was the crown going to go? Well, over here, Henry had a sister called Margaret, and she married James IV of Scotland. Now, they had a son, and he was called James V, and he had a daughter who was called Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, Elizabeth beheaded her, but it was okay because she had a son, and he was called James, and he became James VI of Scotland. Now, over here, there was another Mary, and she was Henry's other sister. She went over to France. She came back, and she married again, had a daughter called Frances, and she had a daughter called Lady Jane Grey. She couldn't take the throne because Mary had beheaded her. So it was up to James who was left. James was Protestant, and he came and became James VI of Scotland and James I of England. Now, he had a son, and his name was Charles I, and he had a son, and his name was Charles II. There was a bit of jiggery-pokery in the middle with an interregnum and a bit of civil war, but Charles II took the throne in the Restoration. Now, he died without a legitimate heir, and so his brother James became the king. He was James II of Scotland, but also James VII of England. Now, he was Catholic. It all went a bit horribly wrong. He was chased out, and he was replaced by his daughter, who was called Mary. And Mary happened to be married to the Protestant William of Orange, who became William III, because they were going to rule together. Now, he was also a cousin, because Charles I had another daughter called Mary, and he was her son. Anyway, they died without an heir, and so the throne went to sister Anne. Anne, despite 17 pregnancies, died without an heir. Where were they going to go? Well, there was a long, far away, distant relation who was Protestant. George of Hanover became the next king, and he was George I. He had a son, George II. He had a son called Frederick, and he died. But it was okay because he had a son, and he became George III. And George III had a son, and he was George IV. George IV died without an heir, but his brother William... Oh, hang on, we've gone off screen. His brother William became William IV. He died without an heir, but it was okay because they had a brother called Edward, and his daughter was Victoria.